Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. We're continuing the series on MBTI types as narcissistic parents, and today's type is one that I think is especially recognizable for a lot of people, particularly in cultures where family reputation and community image carry significant weight. We're looking at ESFJs, also known as the console type. Before I get into it, the usual disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. Nothing here is a clinical diagnosis. This is my learning diary, based on research and observed patterns. Most ESFJs are genuinely warm, caring, and devoted parents who create real stability and love in their families. But when narcissistic patterns overlay the ESFJ style, what you get is a very specific dynamic that's particularly difficult to name because the parent looks, to everyone on the outside, like exactly what a good parent should be. And that gap between what's visible publicly and what's experienced privately is one of the most painful parts of this situation. Let me start with what ESFJ actually means. ESFJ stands for extroverted, sensing, feeling, and judging. People of this type are often described as warm, socially engaged, and deeply committed to their families and communities. They're the ones who organize gatherings, who remember everyone's birthdays, who make sure the household runs smoothly and the family shows up for each other. A healthy ESFJ parent is genuinely wonderful. They create a sense of belonging. They make the home feel like a home. They're attentive to practical and emotional needs alike, and they take their role as a caregiver seriously in a way that shows in their daily actions. But when narcissistic patterns take over, that same care becomes something that controls rather than supports. The attention to how the family appears shifts from natural pride into obsessive image management. The warmth becomes conditional on the child performing well enough to reflect positively on the parent. And the close involvement in family life crosses from caring into suffocating. Let me explain the core pattern. The ESFJ narcissistic parent's entire sense of self-worth is tied to being seen as a good parent. Not actually being one, though they may genuinely believe they are. Being seen as one. By the neighbors, by the relatives, by the church, by the community. The child exists in this dynamic as proof. Proof that the parent is doing things right. Proof that the family is good, respectable, admirable. And because the child is a reflection of the parent's worth, the child's behavior becomes something the parent manages rather than something they simply witness and support. This is what makes the control in this dynamic feel so much like love. Because in the parent's mind, it is love. They genuinely believe that managing the child's behavior, choices, relationships, and appearance is part of taking care of them. They don't experience it as control. They experience it as devotion. And that sincerity makes it even harder to push back against, because the child who tries to assert independence is told, directly or indirectly, that they're rejecting someone who loves them. Let me talk about the mother and father versions separately. The ESFJ narcissistic mother is often the most socially visible version of this pattern. She's known in the community. She's the one who brings food to neighbors, who's involved in everything, who everyone describes as warm and generous. And the child of this mother is often on the receiving end of comments like, "You're so lucky to have her." And they genuinely don't know how to respond to that because the private version of this person is so different from the public one that the child sometimes feels like they're describing a completely different person when they try to explain what it's actually like at home. Behind the warmth she presents to the world, this mother is deeply invested in how the family looks. She tracks her child's behavior not primarily for the child's well-being, but for what it communicates to other people. She might say things like, "What will people say?" or "You're embarrassing me," or "Do you know what the neighbors will think?" And the child, who genuinely loves this parent, absorbs the message that their personal choices are not really theirs. They belong to the family's image. She also tends to be very involved in ways that feel caring but cross into control. She might manage the child's friendships, not because she doesn't trust the child, but because certain friendships look better than others for the family's social standing. She might push the child toward particular activities, careers, or relationships that fit the image she has in mind. And when the child makes a different choice, she doesn't necessarily forbid it. She responds emotionally in a way that makes the choice feel like an act of cruelty toward her. The guilt tactics in this type are particularly effective because they reference real sacrifice.
She did give a lot.
She did work hard. She was genuinely involved. And the child can't fully dismiss that, which makes it almost impossible to name what's wrong with how that sacrifice is being used. After everything I've done for you is a sentence that lands with full weight because it isn't entirely false. The ESFJ narcissistic father tends to operate through a combination of warmth and expectation. He's often the provider, the one who takes care of material needs, who's respected in the community and in the family. And his love is communicated primarily through what he provides. He pays for school. He makes sure the house is stable. He shows up to things that matter. And he expects those contributions to be honored with a certain kind of respect and compliance. When the child does something that doesn't fit the family's image or doesn't show adequate gratitude for what the father has built, the response tends to be a withdrawal. Not necessarily an explosion. A distance that communicates disappointment. A coldness that makes the child feel they've failed someone who is counting on them. And because this father is often respected publicly, the child can feel very alone in their experience of that private disappointment. No one outside would believe it. He seems so devoted from the outside. Let me look at how financial situation shapes this dynamic. A wealthy ESFJ narcissistic parent uses material comfort as part of the control structure. The child has real advantages, real opportunities. But those advantages come with an implicit contract. Use them in the way I approve of. Make choices that reflect well on this family. Don't embarrass us with what you do, with what we've given you. The generosity is real, and the strings are also real, and they exist at the same time. A financially struggling ESFJ narcissistic parent uses sacrifice and struggle as the primary leverage. They gave what they didn't have. They went without so the child could have more. And those things may be true, but they're communicated in a way that transforms them into debt. The child grows up feeling that their own happiness is only legitimate if they've first repaid what their existence cost. When substance dependence is involved with this type, the social performance that defines so much of the ESFJ style becomes impossible to maintain consistently. The parent who is warm and community-oriented and attentive when sober becomes someone different when not. And the child, who already had to navigate the gap between the parent's public persona and their private behavior, now has to manage an even more extreme version of that gap. The community still sees the lovable, warm version. The child lives with the other one. Let me talk about what children of this type of parent tend to carry into adulthood. They're often very socially skilled. They grew up in a home where social performance was the primary currency, and they learned it well. They know how to behave in public, how to present themselves, how to make people feel comfortable. Those are real skills that came from a real environment. But they also often carry a very deep anxiety about what other people think of them. Not a healthy awareness of social context, but a persistent and exhausting monitoring of how they're being perceived, what impression they're making, whether they're living up to some standard they can't quite define. That monitoring was installed very early, by an environment that communicated constantly that other people's opinion of the family was one of the most important things in the world. They frequently have difficulty distinguishing between what they actually want and what they've been taught they should want. Because so many of their choices were shaped by what would look right or feel acceptable to the parent and the community, they can reach adulthood without a clear sense of their own preferences. They know how to make the right choice according to other people's values. They're less sure what their own values actually are. Many children of ESFJ narcissistic parents also struggle with guilt around independence, not just as a concept but as a physical experience. Moving away from the family, choosing a different path, declining to participate in family events, all of these things produce a guilt that feels disproportionate to the actual decision being made. Because in their childhood home, independence wasn't framed as natural growth. It was framed as a kind of betrayal. Before I close, I want to say something directly. If you grew up in a home where you were loved, but where that love felt like it came with terms, where your behavior was always being assessed for how it reflected on the family, where the person everyone outside admired was genuinely hard to live with behind closed doors, your experience was real. The care existed, and the conditions it came with also existed. Both are true, and you don't have to pretend otherwise to honor what was good. Before I go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your choices belong more to your family's image than to yourself? And how did you start figuring out what you actually wanted, separate from what you were expected to want? Drop it in the comments if you're comfortable. I find this is one of the most relatable experiences in this whole series, and I'd love to hear how it showed up for you. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because, as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the buy a treat for my pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.